Good morning, and thank you for coming and listening to us today. So I'm just going to start. Annette actually is a head teacher for electrical as well, so the part-time for both of us was quite a while ago. We're both full-time teachers, and Annette is a head teacher for electrical. So what is SALT? These are our aims in SALT, and we actually now represent quite a lot of different trades, which I'll tell you about. But there's a great deal of prejudices and myths around who or what women are in trades, and I'm going to talk about that as well. We really believe that by working through the aims that we're trying to change attitudes, and it's not just men that we have to change, sometimes women are the most prejudiced of all. And we really believe that by changing and promoting diversity and acceptance for all people in the trades will actually extend the capability of the trades, raise the standards, and it will become a career choice, seen as a career choice, not as a dumping ground for kids that don't, and particularly boys, that don't cope at in school. So this is how we started in 2009. That's only 5 of us. One of those is an electrician. And we actually have, it's changing all the time, but on the last count, we have 25 different trades in SALT. And they range from electricians, plumbers, carpenters, through to farriers, fitters and machinists, diesel mechanics. We do have one hairdresser, but we only have one. We don't discriminate. We actually also have male tradies. Anyone can actually join SALT because we truly believe that the way forward is by men and women working together. The issue is actually not gender. It is currently, but this is about people that want to do this work and maintaining the standards and the levels of the trades. So what do? We actually have meeting groups. We have meeting groups we started in Wollongong. We have meeting groups in Wollongong, Sydney, Canberra, Albury-Wodonga. We've got potential to start a group in Wagga, which we're looking at the moment, Perth and Grafton at the moment. So we're expanding quite rapidly, almost too rapidly at the moment. It's hard to keep a cap on it at the moment. We have a webpage with a lot of information, which includes information about different trades. It includes different venues and avenues and ways to get into trades. People can email us who want to get in the trades. We'll look at their CV, we'll cut and paste it and get rid of a lot of crap and actually say this is what you need to present or this is what you need to do to try and get into these trades. Mostly we say you've got to have a great deal of persistence. We have tradeswomen that have taken 100 applications to different apprenticeships to get in. That's normal. We also believe in the past. This is not new. Women have been doing this for a long time. So we're building an archive of the stuff that's gone before us. And when I show you some figures in a minute, which are slightly different to the ones we've seen, you'll see what I mean. So a lot of information has been buried and lost, and we want to try and change that. On that slide, I also had about workshops and working with different organisations, which I'll talk about as well. So I'm now using pictures of our electricians, and because what I want to show you is that we come in all sorts of types and shapes, and we don't fit into a stereotype. My research, though, and both of us have done quite a bit of research, shows that most of the women that are succeeding at the moment have actually been taught by their dads when they were little girls, so from between the ages of about 5 and 12, how to use hand tools, exactly the same way as the boys have. So we put out a call in 2011 for dads to teach their girls how to use hand tools. Now we've already looked at some of the national statistics. Now one thing you'll notice in this is the figures in 1984 were considerably better. So 30 years ago there was 4.5% women in non-traditional trades. That's a massive difference to now. We have depreciated extensively. You can see that carpenters, now that only represents 0.7% of their trades, but the figures are really tiny. These figures are from Women New South Wales, and they're just coming out shortly in a new paper. And Annette is actually a product of the 1980s, you know, so she's been in her trade over 31 years.
I was 5 when I started.
You know, and these women are still working. You know, they suffered quite severely, a lot of them. But what happened is basically people believed that women had achieved everything. You know, they could go to school, they could, you know, learn what they wanted to learn. But once they came out of school, there's areas that are completely closed down to them. So, as I said, we come in all shapes and sizes. We come from all walks of life. We're single, we're married, we have children, we don't have children, we're straight, we're gay. That is actually totally irrelevant. The important thing about it is we love our trades and we're good at what we do. We're professional people and that's what we want to promote. That's what SALT really wants to promote. We're actually no different to the guys in that we drag our families and friends around. Like I drag people around. That's the house I painted. That's the mural I painted. That's the special effects that I did. You know, I check out my jobs. I want to see that they're holding up. We're all the same. Every tradie does it. Electrical is the largest single trade occupation in Australia. You've already seen that figure. There's only 1,432 female electricians out of a very vast number. So there's a huge amount to be done to change. There's lots of preconceptions about what we look like, so I've included some of our more glamorous women as well. The perceptions are that we can't do the work, that we won't do the work, or we shouldn't do the work. And that comes from all sectors of society and includes the workforce. But 100 years ago, women were told they could not be doctors. They were told they did not have the brain capacity to be a doctor, and if they tried, it would severely damage what little brain they had. We're sort of in that stage at the moment with trade. So, one of the things that SALT does to change attitudes is we partnered with Women New South Wales and we got some funding, and this is our ute, which is down in the car park. The funding was just for the trailer. We had a custom-made trailer built, and it's packed with hand tools and small power tools, and we pull this trailer to venues all over the place. We're actually doing one in Canberra this weekend. And we teach women in 4-hour workshops how to use hand tools. So they actually construct a small little timber caddy. And we teach all age groups. So one of these women in this group is actually 91-year-old Olive. And she loved it. For 4 hours she stood, and our power tools are trade quality. So we're using Milwaukee power tools. They're heavy. 91-year-old woman stood for 4 hours. She did get a smoko break. We did allow her that. And she finished, and she produced it, and she managed very, very well. So we will teach grandmothers. We will teach anyone to try and break down the barriers, because women also don't think about going into these areas. We also work with organisations and companies. And some of the companies we've worked with and are currently working with are people like John Holland Group, TAFE, Master Electricians, and we're working extensively with Women New South Wales, as I said, to promote change. Now, one of the big organisations that we're working with at the moment, and they are present here today, are South Australia Power Networks. And I just want to read you a little bit that they said. So South Australia Power Networks employs approximately 938 blue-collar and 161 apprentices. So of this total, we only have 13 females, which we are trying hard to do something about. And they really are trying, because in 2013, they recruited 27 apprentices, 16 power line and 11 electrical. And of that 11 electrical, 8 are women. That's pretty spectacular. They're sitting over there. Round of applause. But that's not the extent of what they're doing. That's not the end of it. I was contacted by Adrian because I was originally contacted about another issue that they had, or another query that they had, and then he phoned me and he said, we'd like to take on female power line workers. And we've got all this pushback from the guys. They say, no way. And I've got all these queries, can you help? And I said, naively, I said, yeah, I can help. Don't know any power line workers at the moment, but I'll find them. And that's what I did. So the queries coming directly from the floor, from the linesmen themselves and from the company, included things like the physical demands of the job, how long will they last, will they come out, like will they be available, you know, there's a storm, there's a crash, there's a power line down, you've got to work around dead bodies potentially. Are they afraid of doing that kind of work? What about looking after children? And also one of their big concerns was being in an elevated work platform, 2 people working, you're pressed up hard trying to pull a line or do whatever you're doing, and will the women actually put sexual harassment cases against them? Also, how do the women pee? It's as basic as that. The men often pee between the cab and the chassis of the truck, which actually doesn't do much for the trucks, let me tell you. But, you know, how are we going to actually, how are they going to, when they're up in an elevated work platform, you can't move the truck, you can't bring the elevated work platform down, what are the women going to do? So we have combated all of that. I found power line workers, I found 1 in Australia, I found 12 in America, I sent all the queries to them. They are still in the process, this is an ongoing piece of work, they are still in the process of sending all this stuff back to me, but at the moment I've got 5 responses, and they've gone into great depth to respond to these queries, some of which they have said, this is bullshit, but, you know, but mostly they haven't. Mostly they've given reasonable responses to things. So here's one of the power line workers, this is an American one, Jenna, and she has been in the industry for 25 years. She's now a trainer as well, and a very spectacular woman. And the thing that blew me away was, I'm a painter and decorator, so probably all of you that are electricians are going, she's just a painter and decorator, you know, but what we're dealing with is exactly the same. Whether you're a painter and decorator or a farrier or a power line worker or an electrician, we have a common bond. So when our tradeswomen get together, we face exactly the same things, whether you're working in power line or you're working in painting and decorating. In fact, between Annette and I'd actually sort of dealt with a bit more harassment than she had. So, you know, and that's not just because electricians are nicer, they're not. I can say that. So this is Camille. She's the Australian. She worked as a power line worker, but she's now a supervisor for a shutdown crew in remote Australia. And I'm building this document now. They've sent me all their photos of themselves working, and I think it's a powerful body of work. But now I'd like to just finish very quickly by reading a little bit from one of the power line workers. And she said, and she actually was quite confronted by these questions and actually having to answer them, but she gave a really powerful response. And she says, women are much easier to target because of our obviously different physique, and our time-honoured gendered roles provide a much more legitimate smokescreen. The issue becomes clogged up and complex when it's really quite simple. Give women a chance, a real chance, with men willing to train women, not just test their ability and look for cracks in their armour. Judge women as individual workers, not as a gender. Weed out the opinions of men who constantly look for the next reason not to have a woman in their trade. Whose trade is it anyway? It's as much mine as any linesman who came before me. Thank you. I'll pass on to Annette.
Now there's a good-looking sort. That is me. I've just been busted about that 5-year-old thing. So having listened to everybody, and I had X speech prepared, and then Y, and then Z, and then last night back to A again, and listening to everyone here and the type of research that's being done and the ways that women are in the industry, I'm sort of wavering on just going ad lib. So me, back in 1983, at the Kellogg's botany plant, working for James Watt Electrical, I am a fitter mechanic, not just fitter. There's a big difference, isn't there? Isn't there, girls? That's it. Put that. When I applied for the job in 1982, or 1981 actually, at the end of 1981, I went for the aptitude testing. I scored 98%. The 2% I missed out on was a technical drawing question. Because I went to a girls' school back in the 70s, technical drawing was not available. We had cooking, French and all that sort of thing. So I got that bit wrong. I was called later in the week to say that I didn't get the apprenticeship because they didn't have any toilet facilities for women. Okay, so they've got an office, there's women in the office, where do they go? Apparently, the daughter of the manager of James Watt heard about this, and she stormed up to him and said, "You give that girl a go." She went right off at him. And he came back and talked to the Master of Apprentices, and then they reconsidered. But I was always sort of under the impression from a lot of the older traditional guys that I was taking a job from the boys and that I would just go away and have children and leave, and that would, I've deprived some young man of a career. Well, I stayed the longest out of my cohort with the company. I did have children, but I came back to the industry. And so that's now where I begin. A little bit, go back to speech A. As a head teacher of electrical trades, I'm the only woman in my section in the college in electrical trades. So there's a couple of apprentices, but not many. So it can be confronting, I guess, for the guys. I was returning to my office after morning tea one day, and there was a whole group of them lined up. This was just last week, actually. A whole group of them lined up, ready to go back in. I walk into my office, sat down, and this conversation began out in the hallway. I'll read it. What pricked my ears was women's rights, I heard, and then, "Do you want to be a tradie?" And there was lots of laughter. "I've seen heaps of girls as mechanics, heaps." Another person says, "I don't want girls like that, lesbians." More laughter. And then, "You can't do nothing wrong to her. She'll just call the cops and say you raped me." Now, as a post-structuralist researcher now that I'm doing this type of research, these kind of conversations are of real interest to me. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot of discourses being played out there. There's relations of power that are evident in that conversation. That's something I'd love to get my teeth into, and I do. That's the researcher hat. Putting on my teacher's hat, I'd probably want to run a gender equity program for them, get them in and talk about stereotypes and, get some critical thinking skills going in these boys. And as the tradie, with 30 years experience in the industry, I just want to, and as a woman who feels extreme frustration that in over 30 years that I've been in the industry, seems that little's changed, I just want to go storm out into the hallway and give them an uppercut. But instead I sat in my office and I copied down their conversation. So do beware what you say to me because I'm taking it down. So back to post-structuralism. That's sort of the research that I do. I use a post-structuralist methodology. So some of you might be going, yeah, I'm cool with that. Others, So how long do we have? But I'll just sort of put it in a nutshell. Post-structuralist theory allows an understanding of the multiple ways in which we as individuals position ourselves and are positioned by others. It also highlights the multiple discourses that are available to individuals. Discourses in social science is more along what can be said explicitly, who can say it, who has the power, and implicitly what can't be said. So there's relations of power involved, and we don't look at it as a traditional top-down hierarchical relation of power. It's more a web-like structure. And these relations of power are constantly shifting, and discourses never stay static. They're historically contingent and changing, and that's the beauty about post-structuralist research. We look into those discourses. What excites me as a post-structuralist researcher is there's, in those discourses and identifying changes and cracks and fissures in those, what's talked about, is that there's significant potential for agency, and there's a lot of potential for change among these competing choices and paradoxes. So, should I just... so I've talked about that. The gender binary and its implications. When I was talking to about doing some research, I didn't want to do the traditional structural barriers, statistics and that sort of thing. And what I just for ages couldn't work out what I wanted to do. And I read a story. I was reading an autobiography by the first woman pilot in Ansett, Deborah Wardley-Laurie. And I'm a licensed, actually a commercial pilot myself. So I was actually fascinated and irritated at the same time reading her struggles that in the flying industry that she had in gaining employment, and the discrimination that came from both men and women, as Fee has highlighted. She finally got a job, but one of her the one thing that really struck me, and I knew what I was going to do then, was her apparent inordinate fear of losing her femininity. So she talks about being in an environment where the women she worked with, the hostesses, what do we call them these days? Stewards. We don't call them hostesses, were running around everywhere in their heels and looking nice, and she was wearing this male uniform and revolting shoes, as she calls them. And she says, here I was supposed to be doing a man's job, and who was I? How was I supposed to act? Why couldn't I dress like the other women? I wanted to look more elegant. My old fear of losing my femininity had manifested itself again, and I had to find a solution. I knew I wanted to fly aeroplanes, that was for sure, but I no longer wanted to be dressed like a man. So I was thinking, why is it so abhorrent to Deborah to be portrayed or perceived as unfeminine? And it was this... Deborah's experience of struggling to negotiate and reconcile her identity, her feminine identity, with a vocation that was basically male that sparked off my research. I thought about other women working in non-traditional trades like myself. Were they having similar struggles? Were they trying to reconcile an apparent social imperative to maintain femininity with a vocation that could be perceived as a male domain? So that's what led me into that. Okay, thank you. So the gender binary and its implications is one thing I looked into very deeply, and we don't have time to go into it. Someone's laughing there, so they know exactly what I'm talking about. But I have done a lot of work with focus groups. I like to use that methodology. Just the interaction you get among the women, especially ones that know each other, it's fantastic for uncovering these stories about how we talk about ourselves as women, as our femininity, and these dot points here, oh, they're not dot points, but these, what I was uncovering, what I found in the research was how they talked about their bodies, the female body being in a male environment. And it's amazing how they were able to negotiate that in quite sensible and relevant ways. So that's my primary method of data collection. And what I try to do is focus on uncovering the ways in which women, as I said before, position themselves and are positioned within dominant discourses of femininity, and we all know what that is. Just have a look at the photo there. I took my hair out. Oh, sorry, back. I took my hair out because, of course, I wouldn't work with my hair loose in that sort of work. Trying to make myself look a bit more feminine back then. These are sort of things that we have to work with as women in a male environment. And so I try and dig down deep into those discourses and gender performance and how that impacts on how the way the women perform men's work and how they experience being in a woman's body whilst performing that work. So in essence, it's a narration of the multiple ways that gender is played with and played out by women within male-dominated blue-collar workplaces. So very different to your traditional type of research. But what are we looking for? We're looking for, in those stories, possibilities of change. So that's what keeps me going. It's a work in progress. That's what excites me. And in just concluding, so my continuing work, I'm going to persistently inquire into how gender-related knowledge is produced. I want to trouble its truth claims. I want to identify new gender discourses that may be deployed in challenging stereotypes and bringing about social change, especially in my industry. The political endeavour, because everything has to, the personal is political, is to advance and promote women's participation in non-traditional vocational education and training and in the workplace. So thank you for your time, and we'll just conclude to say that, just to bring it together, although Fiona and my research is very different, mine seems like very airy-fairy, which it is, and Fee's is very grounded and down to earth. And we try and dovetail that together, and in that way we're looking to achieve a space for real change in our industry.
And even this event has actually created that, because we've known each other for a long time, but coming to this event, we had a good time with South Australia Power last night, but landed up working till 2 o'clock in the morning. And we realised that we now have a real commitment within ourselves to sparking potential and charging change for the future.
Thank you.